My name is Rear Admiral Monica Ellsworth. But the first time I realized I didn't belong in my own family was the day I graduated from Annapolis. It was one of those perfect spring mornings. Blue skies, brass bands, rows of families waving flags. I stood in full dress whites, the stiff collar biting slightly at my neck. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from hope. Because I had circled the seats. I'd sent them the map. Section B, row 12, 2 seats saved for the people who were supposed to be proud of me. They didn't come. I scanned the crowd like a lost child, willing their faces to appear. 1,000 proud parents cheered as hats soared into the sky like white birds. Mine stayed grounded. 2 plastic chairs sat empty in the middle of that sea of joy, glaring back at me like a quiet accusation. The call had come that morning. Monica, something urgent's come up, my father said briskly. A high-stakes meeting in Dubai could change everything for the Ellsworth Fund. Then my mother chimed in. You know your father, darling, timing is just unfortunate. But of course, we're very proud. Click. No apology, no warmth. Just inconvenience. Dressed up in expensive words. I stood among hugging families, classmates in tears, cameras flashing, and felt like a cardboard cutout. There's a photo from that day. Me and my roommates, arms around each other, all smiles. But if you look closely at my eyes, you'll see it. The void where my family was supposed to be. 1 week later, a package arrived at my base quarters in Norfolk. Cream-colored envelope. My mother's favorite lily of the valley scent. Inside a $4,500 check. And a note in her cursive perfection. Congratulations, Monica. Buy yourself something elegant. A pearl necklace. Perhaps. Not a letter, not a word about the oath I swore the years I bled for this. Just money, just image. I ripped the check into pieces and let it fall like confetti into the trash. It was my silent protest. My first act of quiet rebellion in a revenge story I never meant to start. Looking back, I didn't cry that day. Not outwardly. But something in me hardened because that's when I knew. In their eyes, I wasn't legacy. I was liability, a detour, an embarrassment in dress whites. And yet, they had no idea what that uniform would become or how much it would cost them. Later. It started with a photo. I'd just gotten back from a joint exercise in the Arctic. 3 weeks of ice, sonar drills, and no sunlight. I was still half frozen, half exhausted. I made tea, sat down, and opened my phone out of habit. And there it was, a perfectly lit, professionally edited engagement photo of my little sister Celeste. Standing on a dock in Newport, eyes glowing, her hand in some guy's champagne glass raised, diamond ring front and center. The caption read, she said yes, future had landed chase. Ellsworth legacy. At first, I didn't feel anything, just a flicker of static in my chest. Then came the flood of comments. Mom had left 5 rows of heart emojis. Dad reposted it with proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were gushing. You deserve the world, Celeste. I scrolled through every post, every tag, every album, nothing. Not even a shadow of me. No mention of Big Sister Monica, no throwback photo, not even a casual wish she could be here. It wasn't a mistake. It was surgical. I had been erased. You ever had that moment where you're looking at your own family's celebration and realize they don't even picture you there? Drop a listening in the comments if you felt that sting, because that silence, it's not quiet, it screams. A few days later, the invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, cream envelope, lily of the valley perfume. Mother's signature scent. But the name on the front, not Rear Admiral Monica Ellsworth. Not even Monica, just Ellsworth family, Norfolk branch. Like I was an offshoot, a subsidiary, not a daughter. Inside, there was no note, no handwriting, just a QR code to RSVP in the venue, the Cliff Walk in Newport. That night, I just sat at my kitchen table, fingers on the edge of the envelope. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I was back from a classified submersible training mission in international waters, and my family didn't even think to include me in the guest list like a human being. Then came the text from my mother. One line. Monica, please don't wear the uniform to the ceremony. It's not appropriate for the aesthetic. The aesthetic. She called. The 2 stars I earned in the chaos of the North Sea aesthetic clutter. My jaw locked. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't text back. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, opened the closet. There it was, pressed clean, waiting, white dress, uniform. Gold buttons, rows of ribbons. They didn't want me in the photos. Fine. But if I showed up, they'd never be able to crop me out again. The rehearsal dinner was held at a waterfront restaurant in Newport. Something sleek and expensive. All white linen and polished silver. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. I wasn't late. I just wasn't expected. The Mater D paused when I gave my name. He checked the list, fumbled for a moment, then glanced nervously across the room. That should have been my first clue. Ah, Admiral Ellsworth, he said, voice tight. We have you at the friends of the family table right this way. Friends of the family. He led me past the long main table where my parents sat beaming beside Celeste and her fiancé. Both sets of in-laws. Extended family, smiling, laughing, wine glasses raised. There wasn't a single empty seat left. Not for me, not even a folding chair. I was placed at a small round table near the back, tucked beside the service entrance. A great aunt I hadn't seen in 2 decades sat next to me, asking if I was still in the Coast Guard. Across from me was a third cousin. I barely remembered who spent the entire meal scrolling through Instagram. I sat there perfectly still, my posture military sharp, my jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. Then, midway through dinner, my father stood to make a toast. He tapped his glass with a spoon and the room went quiet. I'd just like to say how proud we are of our Celeste, he began. She's the light of this family, the bridge to our legacy, the future Mrs. Landon Chase. Applause, cameras, flashing lights, he continued. Celeste is grace, brilliance, and class. Everything we've always hoped to pass on. She carries the Ellsworth name into its next chapter with elegance. And in 5 full minutes, he didn't say my name. Not once. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just stared at my half-empty glass of sparkling water and felt like I was fading, like I was turning invisible in real time. After dinner, I stood and approached the main table. Celeste was giggling with her bridesmaids, holding her wrist up to show off a glittering tennis bracelet. My mother was deep in conversation with the caterer. Neither acknowledged me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small velvet box. Inside was a brass compass, 1940s Navy issued. I had it engraved with the wedding date and the coordinates of the chapel where our grandparents were married. A symbol, a nod to our family's roots, to our history. I wanted you to have this, I said quietly. Celeste barely looked up. She opened the box, glanced for half a second, and murmured, "Oh, thanks." Then she set it down right next to a bread plate. 2 minutes later, a waiter came by. He scooped up plates, glasses, napkins. His hand brushed against the compass, nudging it toward the trash bin. I stepped forward fast and caught it before it disappeared with the scraps. My gift, months of searching, meaning intention was nearly swept away like garbage. That was the moment. The exact second I knew I was done begging for a seat at their table. They didn't want me in their story. Fine, I'd write my own. And it wouldn't be quiet. Back at the hotel, I didn't cry. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just sat there in the dark, still in my blazer, the compass resting in my hand like a piece of my dignity. I had to physically recover. The sounds from the rehearsal dinner still rang in my ears. Champagne corks, silverware clinking, my father's voice full of pride for someone else's legacy. That compass could have been me. Nearly discarded, not even noticed. I poured a glass of water and sat at the edge of the bed, staring into nothing. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Ben Carter. He picked up on the second ring. "Admiral," he said, his voice steady. The kind of steady that only comes from seeing someone at their worst and standing beside them. Anyway. Ariane. Class intel. Everything from the USS Greyhound incident. I want the original. Not the scrubbed version. He didn't ask. Why? Didn't hesitate. Understood. Give me 12 hours. I stared out the window. Into the dark. Below, Newport glittered. Inexpensive silence. Somewhere in that city, my family was still laughing. Still congratulating themselves. They thought I'd go back to my room, pack my bag, and disappear like always. Not this time, because I remembered something. Something I'd buried for years. Croft. Vice Admiral Harrison Croft. The man who nearly cost us lives during that mission. The one who overrode safety to impress a group of private investors. Investors that, according to a quietly redacted line in the procurement report, included my father. It was all coming together now. My father's sudden interest in my work. His recent phone call full of warmth, so forced it was. Practically scripted. And Croft's name on Celeste's engagement party donor list. Tucked neatly under the Croft Legacy Foundation. They weren't just ashamed of me. They were using me, my uniform, my security clearance, my access. They didn't care about what I earned, only what they could extract from it. Ben texted at 2:13 a.m. Data inbound. Contains audio logs, unredacted comms. Croft procurement links. I opened the file. Croft's voice came through clear. We'll push into the canyon. The asset is compromised. Maintain perimeter control. The narrative. My stomach turned. And then came another line. An internal memo. From Croft's aide. Flagged confidential. Monica Ellsworth classified as non-operative. Recommend removing Ellsworth Capital from sonar contract. Consideration. There it was. My father tried to leverage me for insider access. And when I refused, Croft blacklisted his entire firm, all while smiling through dinner, toasting Celeste, pretending I didn't exist. They erased me from the family, then blamed me for the fallout. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was war. I closed the file, sat back, and stared at the uniform hanging in the corner of the room. Tomorrow, I wouldn't wear beige. I'd wear the truth, and the truth doesn't blend in. The morning of the wedding, Newport looked like it had been airbrushed. Sunlight bouncing off the ocean, floral arrangements in full bloom, and a breeze just light enough to flutter the sheer fabric on the outdoor altar. Everything was perfect on the surface. I arrived at the cliff walk venue without calling ahead, without warning. I didn't need to. I wore my service dress, white uniform, 2 silver stars on each shoulder, ribbons in full polished shoes, no makeup, no apologies. Heads turned before I even made it to the check-in table. The planner flinched at the sight of me. Admiral Ellsworth, welcome. She stammered, already scanning the seating chart in panic. You're listed in the last row, back of the room. I nodded. Perfect. Let them bury me again. This time it would backfire. I walked down the aisle alone, past rows of silk dresses and pocket squares, past my mother's tight smile and my father's sudden urge to check his watch. Celeste refused to look at me at all. I sat down quietly in the very last row. My presence wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. The ceremony began. Music, vows, perfume, and perfection. But then came the offhand announcement from the officiant. Before we continue, we'd like to take a moment to honor those in service, if any are present. And that's when it happened. From the second row, Captain Ben Carter stood. His uniform gleamed just as brightly as mine. He didn't face the altar. He turned toward me. He saluted and said loud enough to cut through the orchestra, "Rear Admiral Monica Ellsworth, ma'am, thank you for your service." The room gasped. Dozens of heads swiveled, eyes widened. A few guests actually stood. My mother's lips parted. My father turned to stone. And then the screens meant to show a romantic slideshow flickered. Ben's tech team planted among the AV crew had done their job. The screens went black. Then came a sonar map. The USS Greyhound mission. Then came Croft's voice. "The potential loss of life is acceptable. Control the narrative." Murmurs erupted. The next clip played. My voice cutting across the comms. Calm. Firm, unflinching. Negative command. "I'm overriding that order. We initiate search and rescue now." But it didn't stop there. On screen appeared a confidential email between Croft's staff and my father's firm. R.E. Ellsworth. Capital's Asset Non-Operative Recommend. Terminating access. The whispers turned to outrage. Then another man stood, an older Navy vet in civilian clothes. "I'm Captain David Egan," he said, his voice booming. "I was commanding officer aboard the Greyhound that day and Rear Admiral Ellsworth here. She saved my entire crew when your Vice Admiral left us to die." He turned and looked me in the eye. Then he saluted. I stood slowly. The room was silent, not because they respected me yet, but because they were stunned that I existed, that I had been here the whole time, sitting in the back row, wearing everything they tried to erase. The illusion was shattered. My family hadn't just disrespected a daughter. They'd tried to erase a hero. And now the whole damn room knew it. The ballroom erupted, not with applause, but with shock, gasps, raised phones, and a wall of whispers that spread like fire through velvet and crystal. "Vice Admiral." Croft's face turned corpse white. My father stood, face red, voice trembling. "This is a misunderstanding. Some sort of technical mix-up," he stammered, grabbing Croft's arm. But it was too late. The truth wasn't whispered anymore. It was broadcasted. Two federal officials in dark suits stepped into the aisle, badges raised. "Vice Admiral Harrison Croft," one said clearly. You're under investigation for obstruction of justice, falsification of national defense records and procurement fraud. You'll come with us. Handcuffs clicked. My father collapsed into a chair like a man whose strings had just been cut. My mother sat frozen, mouth open, face drained of color. And Celeste, she was crying. Not the graceful, misty-eyed kind of crying, but red-faced. Mascara running, so she stumbled across the room. Caught up to me just as I turned to leave. Monica, please, she gasped, grabbing my sleeve. Tell them it was a mistake. You've ruined my wedding. I looked down at her hand, clutching my uniform. Your wedding, I said softly, was built on silence, lies, and someone else's sacrifice. That's not a foundation. That's a collapse waiting to happen. She blinked, stunned. Maybe for the first time, she was really seeing me. Not just the uniform, me. Behind her, my mother finally stood and hissed. You've destroyed this family's reputation. I met her eyes without blinking. You didn't need help destroying it. You did that all on your own. And I walked away. Not out of rage. Not to make a scene, but because I didn't belong there anymore, and I didn't want to. Out in the corridor, the air smelled like salt and paste. I exhaled slowly, like a pressure valve, releasing after years of being clamped shut. For the first time in decades, I felt light. Weeks later, I got a small package delivered to my naval office in Norfolk. No return address. Inside, the brass compass, the one they'd almost thrown away, a sticky note in familiar handwriting. Ben figured you might want this back. I placed it on my desk next to my command insignia, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of who I am, of what I've survived. A few months after that, I was walking the pier in my off hours, cap in hand, wind in my hair, when a young woman approached me, holding the hand of a little boy. Are you Admiral Ellsworth? She asked, her voice tight. I nodded. My husband, he served under you on the Greyhound. Said. You saved his life. She pressed a crayon, drawing into my hand. It was a crooked ship with my name written in shaky block letters. Thank you, the little boy whispered. And just like that, I knew my legacy isn't found in their family albums. It's found in the people I stood for. The ones who stood for me. Have you ever had someone try to erase you, then regret it? Tell me in the comments below. Not because they deserve your story, but because you